the informed investor. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
I'm very pleased to say our informed investor, Charles Tarby, who is the chairman of Century 21, is back on the line for 2019. Great to have you back.
Thank you very much, Steve.
I reckon I saw a Century 20. I tried to take a picture of it. A Century 21 office in Turkey, in Istanbul.
Yeah, you're right. You did. Now, luckily or unluckily, it doesn't have anything to do with me personally. It's certainly part of the global network, but I think that'd be far too much work for me to extend myself to that area. My region is called Australasia, and that there are certainly parts around the world that I don't get involved in. And it's quite an extraordinary brand, because recently I went to a regions meeting, and there was a Uganda representative. So
really,
yes, and you think of these different countries, and you think that they don't have houses, or they don't sell houses like we might in Australia. I'm just blown away. Ethiopia was another area where Century 21 has opened, and again, my vision of Ethiopia is, of course, all we see is donate money to these poor, starving children. But they're thriving economies, which is really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, in Turkey, you would be better off keeping away from that, because I drove from Istanbul down to Gallipoli, and my driver was explaining, I said, because when we came back, it was on dusk, and I said, why is there no lights on in any of these big towers along this highway? And he said, we call it the concrete tsunami. They built hundreds and hundreds of these towers, and no one can afford to buy them because the economy's shot and the banks have racked up the interest rates, and so people can't get a home loan, and so they're all vacant. They're all vacant.
Starting to sound an awful lot like Sydney and Melbourne, isn't it?
It is. So do you think it's going to go that way? Is it going to get that bad?
Look, we're so fortunate in this country that our banks are so strong, and we're so fortunate the interest rates are where they are, and we're so fortunate also that there's a great deal of interest in this incredible country from around the world. There'd be more people wanting to come here than they would want to many other parts of the world, and I think that rescues us a great deal. We've just had a very difficult time in a changing market. There's a lot of negativity out there because that's what's being reported, and it does impact. It does. Certainly, we needed a change in the way the market was going. There's no doubt about that, especially in Sydney and Melbourne. But of course, the way it's being reported is scaring people. The negative gearing talk from Labor is scaring people. The Royal Commission of Banking scaring people. It's almost, again, like that perfect storm. And when you go to apply for a loan now, when the brokers start asking you if you have a $17 a month Netflix account, because that could impact on your ability to repay, you know that people are running scared. And I think that's probably more the issue than the market itself.
Clearance rates, particularly for Melbourne, are really quite frightening. I mean, this time last year there was a 70% clearance rate. It's now to 44.
44. Early days for Melbourne, of course, Steve, but that is a big drop. Sydney was 53.7 versus 57.1 last year. So Sydney's pretty well balancing itself out, which we're starting to notice in that marketplace. But Sydney had a correction well before Melbourne, and so Melbourne's going through that follow-on of that correction, and I think you'll start seeing that in other places like Hobart, where the marketplace went really quite strong, maybe too strong. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I've got all the figures in and watching them every day now, and the reports are coming through. The interesting part about it is the vacancy rates in places like Melbourne are still very, very low. So, 0.65% vacancy rate in Melbourne is still very, very good. So there's a few areas that haven't kicked in, like, you get the slower market, you'll generally get investors not buying into the marketplace. So this could have a negative impact on tenants, because all of a sudden investors can't buy, and then we might get the squeeze on tenants, which I was hoping was going to be over.
Queensland seems to be weathering the storm a little better, although up north at the moment it's dreadful. But a lot of investors putting investment money into Queensland.
Yeah, well, it's the pricing is fantastic. It's it's a lot more advanced than, say, Adelaide, that market, because of the population base. So it didn't take off. When everybody predicted it was going to take off last year, I think you and I certainly didn't, but when everybody was predicting it was going to take off, it didn't. And I think now it's where Sydney and Melbourne should be. In other words, they've got to come back, whereas Brisbane didn't go that far ahead to have to come back. So it's still a great place to invest. There's some fantastic buys, but again, caution investors to be aware that the rental market may change, and to make sure they've got some funds in excess just in case there's a higher vacancy rate there, because a lot of investors have moved up there, as they did down to Hobart, and that could cause an oversupply in rental property.
We saw Ross Greenwood's excellent piece on 60 Minutes on the Opal Tower last night. We had a fire in Cladding in Spencer Street in Melbourne today. I mean, who's responsible for this sort of stuff?
I actually was listening to you a little earlier on and listening about your certifiers.
Cladding.
Yes, we were talking about the certifiers and private certifiers and so on. And I think that there's a role for everybody to play in this, and obviously the state governments and their different building professional boards have got a responsibility. Private certifiers were critical to the changes that we were going through, and a lot of people have been bagging private certifiers, but in reality, local government councils took so long to get things done. I mean, no disrespect to most of the councils, but when you had this rush of property being developed across the country, which we've had, and the councils don't have the resources to put more people on, you needed private certifiers. So I think there might be, like every industry, some people who didn't know what they're doing or didn't do the right job. But in reality, they're an essential part of growth, which is what we needed. Opal Towers is probably no different than many other buildings around the country, in that the lady you had on earlier was talking about the fact that you buy off the plan, it's sold, they know they're going to get their money, so maybe their quality drops. And that is what you really do need to watch.
Well, that's disturbing, and that's what Ross was reporting last night. Great to have you back, Charles. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Steve.
Charles Tarby there, the chairman of Century 21. Imagine if you owned one of those Opal Tower apartments and you wanted to then on-sell it. You would have no...
I'm Dr. Theo Spirakis from Bexley Dental. I've dedicated the last 10 years of my life to studying implant dentistry. I've travelled the globe to learn from the world's most respected clinicians, including Professor Paulo Malo, founder of the All-on-4 procedure in Portugal. It changed my life and allows me to change the life of my patients, enabling them to smile again with confidence. Why wait? Change your smile and your life today. Book your free 30-minute All-on-4 consultation now at bexleydental.com.au.